Welcome to the Media Casters with your business besties, Corinna and Julie Loken. In every episode, you'll get behind-the-scenes access to experts who share their struggles and successes in podcasting, publishing, and presenting. So grab a pen, grab your bestie, and kick it with Corinna and Jules.
We're live again, the Media Casters. We are casting some media today.
We're casting some media with somebody who has really kind of changed the way that I think you and I look at podcasting.
Right. His story is so fabulous. When we bring him up, we will have to go into detail about his podcast, the Admirals Almanac. What is the Admirals Almanac? Well, it's a podcast by the Rear Admiral of the Navy, Garry E. Hall.
That's right. And one that was censored, essentially, right?
It is, yes. And we'll have to ask him, was it clickbait or is that just his imagination in terms of naming his podcast? But why did he come into such conflict? Probably because he sat on the National Security Council to the president.
Well, let's bring him up and let's have this discussion. I'm super excited to get to know him.
I've had the pleasure of meeting him several times before. And guess where we met, Corinna? This is wild where we met.
On Clubhouse?
No, close.
Wisdom?
Wisdom app.
Wisdom.
Wow.
Wisdom.
Great.
I was the first person, right, Garry? I was your first.
I was the first. You were the first person I talked to on the Wisdom app. I signed up for it because I got that email saying we want your podcast on the Wisdom app. And at first I thought, as I Googled it, there were a lot of people out there going, is this a scam? And apparently it's not. There are some wackadoodles on Wisdom, but Julie was definitely not one of those.
Wackadoodle.
Jinx, I love that word.
Somebody came up to me recently and said, you're the same age as old people. And I went, what? That's, I'm trying to use clean words.
Well, you do find when you listen to some of these younger podcasts hosted by millennials that there's quite a bit of cussing and they're very willing to go ahead and use other words.
Did you swear in the Navy a lot or no?
I have an approach where occasionally I would use a four-letter word for humorous emphasis where it would catch somebody off guard. But I used language, humor, and kind of a surprise approach to people to get their attention. But I wouldn't say I would routinely, use foul language just because we're in the military.
Well, cussing like a sailor.
Cussing like a sailor.
Right.
A sailor.
That's
or
perfect.
Drinking like a sailor or whatever. But
Sailors get a bad rap.
But I'll tell you, it's a heck of a lot of fun. I was a guy that everybody wanted to drink with, fly with, party with, go on liberty with, and I forced myself to be somewhat famous and successful, both professionally and personally. But then I realized it was detriment to my family. And my wife and I, for 4 years, we taught marriage prep on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., for St. Peter's on Capitol Hill. A lot of young professionals. And I used to say my priorities, as I forced myself to be famous and successful, to be that guy that everybody wanted to fly with, my priorities were Garry, Garry, Garry. And my wife standing next to me would say, and Garry. Well, I'll tell you, at that point, I was promoted early to commander, selected to command a squadron in Japan. And my wife said, okay, so you're going to command this squadron in Japan, very heady assignment, very exciting. Are you going to divorce me at the end of that command? I went, excuse me? And she pointed to all the men that were divorcing their wives at this point in their lives. And she asked me some tough questions. And I think that goes to leadership, that even in a family, leadership is needed, and it doesn't have to be any one, either the dad or the mom, but somebody has to be leading. And she then led and asked some very tough questions and got my priorities. And so I sought a little insight and worked on it for about 6 months, and I've changed my priorities to my faith, my family, in the Navy, which didn't mean I detracted anything from my service in the Navy or the operations of the Navy or readiness of the Navy, but it made me think of things differently. And from that point on, my career skyrocketed because people saw that I was compassionate about my family and my faith in their families. And the support was unbelievable. And again, my career just took off from there.
That's really interesting. I mean, I have had that experience in collaborating with Dr. Joseph Maroon, who is the team neurosurgeon for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so he has, for 40 plus years, been involved with that team. But there was a moment in time where he said the same thing. He had dedicated so much of his life essentially to just being a surgeon, right? That everything else in his life kind of fell apart. He was divorced, his parents died, and he had to figure everything out from square one. And so what he chose to do was follow this kind of perspective where you have a line for essentially your work life, a line for your personal life and for your physical life and also for your spiritual life. And it should make a square. But the reality is so many of us focus so much on our work life that ends up like a flat line with a little itty bitty square at the very end, where all you're doing is focusing on work and you've relegated the personal life to being something almost of a 4-letter word. You just don't focus on it the way that you necessarily should. And it means that you're out of balance. You don't have as rewarding of a life as you might otherwise. You can't bring joy to your work the same way because you're essentially overtaxed, right? And so I think it's so crucial that we think about trying to have our lives in at least some semblance of a balance where one thing doesn't swallow you whole.
Absolutely. Balance is the key word there. And the other thing is men have convinced themselves that we put our family first by focusing on our job. In other words, you've heard I never needed to tell you I loved you, children, because I provided you with a roof over your head. I provided you with food. I provided you with education. I didn't need to be there. I showed you by working hard. And I think that's a story we told ourselves that is a false story, and that balance is an absolute must. And especially that's hard to achieve in today's world with, we have the internet of all things in our, the palm of our hand. We have, the internet, we have our smartphones, et cetera, and those can really detract from the balance of our lives.
And what is balance? And I honestly don't believe that there's anything there. Balance is a misnomer, if you will. It's about the bounce back, not letting the highs get too high, the lows get too low. But what I'm fascinated about is that you have this way and platform to articulate what you believe in terms of leadership. And let's rewind, and we teased a little bit about it at the beginning, but let's rewind 4 years ago and tell us about the inception of the Admirals Almanac, your love child, if you will, this podcast. And how did you get started in podcasting?
Well, one, because I'm a nerd, a geek who's always looking to...
you're surrounded by nerds and geeks today, Gary.
To use technology. And again, as I said, I've been gifted with the ability to motivate people through telling my stories and things of that nature. And somebody at this convention just said, Gary, you always start off making us laugh. And then once you have our attention, you hit us home with the message. I have so many stories, and somebody said, you should be recording these stories for posterity. And I thought, well, geez, I need to record a lot of things for my children. So when the day comes that they at least have audio recordings of my stories or my philosophies or things of that nature. And so a long time ago, when I was a young lieutenant, an older lieutenant commander said, Gary, what are your philosophies on leadership? And I went, it's desire, commitment, responsibility, accountability, creating a vision, communicating that vision, and then exploring the traits of good leaders. And so I turned that into about a 45-minute talk, and I used to call it Leadership, Fitness, and Sex, because it had nothing to do with fitness or sex, but at least now I've got your attention. So, and then I used to tell, when I would tell stories, I go, well, some of what I told you may or may not be true. And so I came up with, fiction or fact from the Commander's Almanac, and then it was fiction or fact from the captain's almanac as I would punctuate a story. I would go, oh, that's fiction or fact from, the skipper's almanac when I would talk to the crew or things of that nature. But I've given this talk, leadership, fitness, and sex to everything from San Diego State University's executive MBA program to SeaWorld executives to hotel executives to 40 priests in Washington, D.C. And everybody seems to pick up some nuggets, some pearls of wisdom from that. So I'd been talking to a young naval officer who had started a podcast while he listened to a podcast while walking the Appalachian Trail from from south to north. And then he said, I'm going to do one similar. And he talked about, well, you just got to do it. And he said, hey, Admiral, just go ahead and start telling your stories. So I thought about it and I said, well, I'll call it the Admirals Almanac, the wit and wisdom of Rear Admiral Garry Hall. Change your leadership, change your life. And so there, went to Fiverr, had a logo made, had an intro made, and got a microphone, got some software, and off I went. And so I was at the White House. And before I'd gotten to the White House, I was a head of a nonprofit association. They said, oh, yeah, Admiral, you need to launch this podcast. And so I was then invited to join the National Security Council. And a lot of people went, why the heck are you joining this administration? And as I said, it was the administration that everybody loved to hate. And I said, well, I've served every president since Richard Nixon, in my time in the Navy. And that when called to serve, you serve at the best and you do your best to take care of people and programs. And even my priest asked me, why are you going to, take this position at the White House? I said, Father, they've basically given me the Christian or the Catholic portfolio. I had immigration, migration, refugees, fragile states and stabilization, democracy and governance, international religious freedom, UN peacekeeping operations, and recycling. I didn't have recycling.
You were trying to make sure
we
we're
just threw
listening.
everything in there.
There you
And
go.
He was going to throw sex, politics, and bacon in there too, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. And so I had about 6 to 8 experts working for me. And so I had done this lecture, which I then changed the topic to leadership now, the basics tenets of my leadership theories. And I released it as Leadership, Fitness, and Sex. And within, I did that late at night. I released it on Libsyn. And as I walked into my office the following morning, there was the public affairs folks going, what the hell is this? And, I'm going, it was clickbait. It has nothing to do with, and I say that right away, it has nothing to do with fitness or sex. But recently, somebody close to the president had just been walked out of the White House after accused of sexual assault.
Oh, jeez.
And so the fact that I said that, so anyway.
It's interesting.
They shut me down. So I, went back into my corner and just said, okay, I'll save it for later. And so then I relaunched a couple of years later. And I mean, it's not I've only got 12 or 13, 14 episodes out there, but I think they're quality episodes talking with diverse men and women who've had leadership experiences, and including a recent one I did with Father Jim Kelleher of Our Lady of Corpus Christi, and on his ability to create a vision and communicate that vision and realize dreams. So I've had some great feedback, and I think based on the numbers, I'm in the top 10% of podcasts. Podcasts are different from Instagram or Facebook, So anyway, it gives me an ability to talk to people, perfect my interviewing skills, and learn some new things.
Well, I love that. And personally, I think that's one of the real unsung hero bits of podcasting, because you get to connect with incredible people and have the opportunity to learn something new about something that interests you. So I love that.
He's causing controversy wherever he goes. And the first thing that came to me is, why did you not rename your podcast Leadership, Fitness, and Sex?
Well,
And that's going to be the name of your new book, Gary. I'm just throwing that out there.
there you go. Well, even when you think you're right, as an aviator in a multi-pilot cockpit, you may have the most experience and you're flying with a younger pilot and they bring up a question or something. You could say, don't challenge me. I know what I'm doing. I think it behooves you to listen to the input of others, whether they're experienced or inexperienced or somebody outside of your organization, and go, maybe I should weigh that a little bit. And so I felt, okay, let me learn from that lesson and, not be obstinate and push ahead. Well, this is my idea. And, change. And I think that's what life is about, is if any time in life you go, okay, I got it completely wired now, you're now stagnant and you're an old fart. And especially, we talked a little bit earlier about marriage. And if you think you ever have marriage wired, you are wrong. So
when are we going to meet Darlene, by the way? Where is Darlene? Bring her in.
She said, all right, you're going to go on the air. I'll go run some errands. But I want to tell you, I have a very traditional marriage. I make all the big decisions. Darlene makes all the little decisions.
Hmm.
And
See, I wonder sometimes.
In 45 years, show you how good I am. I haven't had to make one big decision yet.
I knew there was a punchline.
I said that at a conference with about 2,000 people, and you could have heard a pin drop as all the air was sucked out of there. They were ready to storm the stage, and and I hit them with the punchline.
I have a joke for you. Okay, so this is actually from a friend. They're like, "Oh, you ever see your husband doing this with his ring? You know what he's doing?" I'm like, "No, what? Trying to figure out the combination."
Ouch.
Just running the ring around with his finger. Anyway, I love a good joke. That one was good. You had me for a second there.
No, but also, Julie, you mentioned balance and how difficult it is, balance. But I'll tell you, here is a method or a secret that once given to you can change you, and you'll curse me for it. But and that is, when you are physically present, you need to be mentally present. And I would tell that to the young professionals in marriage prep in Washington, D.C. And again, they'd all be in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're all working as staffers or working on Capitol Hill. And you tell them, Sunday night, and you're sitting there with your spouse, you need to be mentally present, not going, okay, I've got to get a PowerPoint presentation, or I've got to get
That's what I was doing last night, Gary. It's like you were watching me or something.
And now that I've told you that, it'll make you think, and so my wife and I, we went to an ice cream social DJ dance party at our granddaughter's elementary school in San Diego. And all these Southern California mothers with their four-wheel wagons come dragging them onto the grass, set up their sunshades. And then as their kids are getting their face painted, dancing with the DJs and eating ice cream, they're going like this. Oh, I like that. Oh, yeah, okay, I'm going to forward that. I'm going... Yeah, you're on your phone when your child is out there dancing and having a good time with their friends, and so we need to. And it's difficult to put that phone down, but we have to.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I was recently at one of those ice cream socials at my school for my 4 and 7-year-olds, and I was just struggling to keep an eye on both of them as they ran in different directions.
Right.
I wasn't in a position to use my phone in that case because of the age they're at. But I also get the temptation. The reality is that we're asked to do so much in a given day. We have to balance and juggle chainsaws. And sometimes just a momentary escape into watching some silly video on TikTok can actually provide some respite from the humdrum of the day. So I get that too, but if you're not present for your kids, then you aren't actually going to be building those memories. They're going to notice too, oh, mom's always on her phone.
Right.
And that's the thing that I think is really hard, especially if you start to understand that by the time your children leave the house, they've already spent most of the time that they'll ever spend with you.
Right.
You're making me really sad, Corinna.
They're going to go off into the world and be their own birds flying high, and You know, they come home from time to time to the old nest, but it's not the same.
That is the hardest part of having adult children. When my daughter, we moved from San Diego to Omaha, Nebraska, and in San Diego, my daughter was eligible to start kindergarten. In Omaha, she was not, unless we took her to see a psychiatrist or psychologist. Anyway, we started her in kindergarten, and she didn't make 5 years old until, and the kindergarten teacher said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because the sooner you start her, the sooner she's going to be out of the house." And we're going, "No, start her, you know." And then boom, a blink of an eye, and it's 12 years later, and we're going, "Where are you going, little birdie?" You know, as she's flying the coop. And yeah, time flies, and ages 4 and 7, what great huggable years you have right
That
there.
is a good word to describe it. Huggable years.
Yeah, because once they hit a certain age, they start smelling and rebelling. You know.
I love, that's where I'm at, smelling and rebelling.
So I think during this smelling and rebelling stage is when you have to stick your arm out as they run by you in the kitchen, clothesline them, pull them in, kiss them on the head, and then release them. You know, just so, because they're at that age, they still need a hug and a kiss, but they, are going to fight it.
They won't really ask for it, even if they enjoy it.
It's so true. It goes by so fast. And you're making me think, because I have children ages 11 through 21. So I'm in the smelling and rebelling. One's a little bit huggy. And then I have one that's kind of come full circle, my oldest. But we miss it. We miss all the goodness. And I'm just curious to know what you're looking back, the evolution of technology, the evolution of smartphones, the evolution of everything that's distracting us, good or bad, from your perspective as a young parent or should I ask Darlene this question?
Go ahead.
Or to now, where everyone is so distracted by the white noise.
I remember, getting Centipede and a few of those video games and or pagers and paging a teenager 20 times, 911, call home, and them ignoring it. So there's some goodness in today's technology. Of course, there's a lot of issues with texting. I mean, texting is a great method to contact somebody, make sure they're available, but a lot of times communications by text alone don't have the same thing as voice communications, and it can be misinterpreted. So I'm always telling people, well, if you're not getting the right response, pick up the phone and call. But I think every generation is going to have challenges. We're going to continue with different electronics, and so you just grow with it. And I think the big thing is that those huggable years and loving unconditionally. So technology will change, but a child who is loved unconditionally will not, will benefit no matter what the generation. And the other thing is parents need some help in coaching on. I remember I was frustrated with my oldest son when he was a teenager, and later looking back, talking to professionals, his behavior was fully in the green, and I thought it was in the red if you want to use the stoplight system. So, but I'd love to tell you a story. My son, very brilliant, but he never turned in any assignment. So his GPA was less than 2.0. And so they had a snap meeting.
Never turned in an assignment. That's every parent's dream.
Yep. And we had a snap meeting with all his teachers and the vice principal and him and his parents. Kids called down the office, and he had 2 teachers crying. We love him. He's, has such worldly experience, and we don't know. I thought he was only, messing up in my course. Well, anyway, that didn't work, and it was my birthday. I was in command of a squadron, and it was my birthday, and I'm leaving the squadron, and I'm going, it's my birthday, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill my son because he won't get his act together. And I'm driving off the base, and I'm driving down the main drag of Naval Air Station North Island, and I said, it's probably not a good idea to kill your child on your birthday. So I passed the base chapel, and I just did a hard right turn into the parking lot, threw it in park, walked into the chaplain's offices, and there was probably 4 or 5 chaplains. And a young petty officer goes, "Can I help you, Commander?" And I said, "Yep, I need to see a chaplain because I want to kill my son." And I think of Dr. Evil. No, I really do want to kill him. Anyway, this chaplain comes out, who we then built a relationship that lasted another 10 or 15 years until he passed away. But he took me in his office and he spent 45 minutes with me. And he said, "Gary, has anybody ever overlooked your faults?" And it was like all of a sudden a World War II movie. Satch, Rico, the Sarge, the Colonel, all these people that had overlooked my faults. And he said, "Overlook your son's faults. He said, love the shit out of that 1.65. Love him the way Jesus loves you unconditionally." So I drove home and I decided, okay, I'm going to practice this unconditional love. And so occasionally I would have to pull Darlene aside and say, "Darlene, I need to vent. And I'm not going to say this to my child, but this is what I want to say right now." Anyway, I would vent, but I loved my children unconditionally. And so 2 weeks go by and my daughter goes to Darlene, "What's wrong with Dad?" She said, "What do you mean, what's wrong with Dad? He's so nice." She goes, "Well, what's wrong with that?" She goes, "We're afraid he's going to go back." So anyway, learning to love unconditionally, it's a hard skill to learn, but it makes all the difference in the world. And your child is going to be who they're going to be, not who you are trying to mold them into. You can guide them, but they're still going to be who they are. So that 1.65 guy is now a cybersecurity engineer at Qualcomm, a musician, a tremendous father, a tremendous son. And, had I not loved him unconditionally, I don't know what my relationship would be with him today. And it's a marvelous relationship. And he's told me that his peer friends envy the fact that he has a dad that he can call, see, whatever, and we have the relationship we have.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Best birthday gift ever for you, Gary.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I recently sent all 3 of my children a video which I think it was Instagram Reels or something, where an older man is saying to a younger man, "So how old is your father?" And the younger man says, "He's 70. He goes, "Well, then and how often do you see your father?" Goes to your point, Julie. He goes, "Maybe once or twice a year." He said, "Okay, so if your father lives the average age of 78, you're only going to see him 16 more times in his life. How does that make you feel?" So I sent that to all my children.
A little guilt there.
Yeah. Sometimes, you can love them unconditionally, but you got to throw some guilt in there. They know me. And my oldest has taken that to heart, and he is, aggressively communicating with his brother and sister across the country, saying, "Dad, we got to have an adventure this summer." And so the boys are going to go hunting in September. But he said, "And that won't be the only one, Dad." But he said, it really hit me of, how much time we have together as a family.
Well, to a point that you made earlier, Gary, one of the things I started to do with my dad was actually connect with him and record his stories as a family podcast. It's something we've only done once so far, but in that 2-hour discussion, I learned things about my dad that I don't think I ever would have known if I hadn't sat down with him with this kind of lens on of wanting to preserve his history and hear where he came from and why, and why he might have made some of the choices he made, like leaving Pennsylvania to come to the West Coast.
Right.
And so I think that there's value in that. There's value in remembering that time is transient. It moves continually. And if we don't stop and take a real moment of appreciation for it along the way, it's just going to pass us right by.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of my first podcasts was an interview with Rear Admiral Kevin Quinn. He's quite a Renaissance man, and we travel. Now we're both retired, and our families, we travel together. But anyway, when I did the podcast in his living room, his wife sat around the corner on the stairs going up to the second floor, and we couldn't see her. But when we got done, she goes, I learned so much about Kevin that I did not know. And so that's what I think is great. And I do tell my guests that, okay, this is the opportunity. We're going to go through a kind of a series of a thought process in this podcast, but it's also going to be, I want it to be for you and your family, for them to learn a little bit more about you. And the other thing is, if I'm interviewing somebody that's, very successful, very senior, I also want to go back to their high school years, so that young people can, when they see an older, successful person, they go, oh, well, sure. Yeah, they're old and they're successful. But I want them to know that, okay, this is what they were doing in high school. This is what they were doing in college, and that they made mistakes, and, they grew.
Can I ask you a silly question?
No questions are silly, but maybe some of the answers are.
All right. What is a rear admiral? I feel like completely ignorant in this. You're interviewing another rear admiral, and I'm like, oh, what does that actually mean?
Okay, so there's general officers and flag officers, and so a rear admiral, which I am, is a 2-star admiral. So there's a 1-star admiral, 2, 3, and 4. So it's rear admiral lower, rear admiral upper, vice admiral, admiral, just like it's brigadier general, major general, lieutenant general, general. So in social settings, you refer to any admiral, whatever their rank is, as admiral, but I'm a rear admiral. And so my last colonoscopy, I brought that up.
Oh my God, Garry, you did not just say that.
Yes. I said, that's okay. I'm a rear admiral. I can take it.
Oh my God, you are the
Your
best.
delivery is so deadpan too, I think, in that situation.
No, but you're amazing. And it's so interesting. Your stories, the stories that you weave are so powerful. Even your presentation is just what's the word I'm looking for, Corinna? Read my mind. It's not, it's subtle. Like, and you're a man who has seen history. You're a man who has conquered wars. You're a man who has seen like the dregs of humanity and society, yet you stay so balanced. And who do you keep talking about? It's your family and your podcast. Family first, podcast second.
There you go. Family first. I'm definitely a blessed man in that I married well, and my roommate, who was here for the past 2 days, and his wife, all 4 of us met at about the same time at Naval Air Station, Corpus Christi. And I was never going to get married, and now my Darlene was never going to date a sailor. And we bumped into each other through interesting circumstances, through other family members on her side of the family. And I, immediately my eyes bulged out of my head, and my heart started pounding. And the second time I saw her, I said, this is the one. And we met March 9th, and we married October 8th. So 6 months, and that's been 45 years.
That doesn't normally happen. You're beating the odds.
She said,
and 45 years later.
She said I tricked her, but she's an extremely strong, loving, and amazing woman.
Okay, you make sure you play this episode for her, because we're Darlene's biggest fans, and I've heard her name several times, and it's always that she's the light, she's the beacon, she's the lighthouse on the shore. And I do have to mention one little thing before we kick it. You have a big fan, and he's somebody I know, and I just said I would mention his name on this podcast, so he would be really just thrilled to hear that. Cody Cannon from Louisiana says hello. He's a super fan and thinks you're an amazing human being and salutes you.
Well, thank you very much, Cody Cannon. We salute you right back. Young people today are the future of this country, and thank you for being a super fan.
Super fans. He's waiting for your book and the next episode of the Admirals Almanac. So,
after this call, I'm speaking with another Rear Admiral, and we're going to
the jokes that are going to fly when you speak to the other Rear Admiral.
Yeah, well, the other thing is, if you know, my mother helped shape my sense of humor. It was a gift I, had early on, and it's not like telling jokes. It's just twisting or a turn of a phrase or how I use a little bit of shock factor occasionally. And she told me, you have a sense of humor and you can hurt people's feelings, and so you need to watch how you use it. So I was graced with shaping, but I did find out through my Navy career that my humor got me in trouble as much as it helped me. And so when you have humor and you use it, you better work extra hard to show people that there's a serious as all get out side. And I did that.
Well, Garry, Rear Admiral, the most amazing podcast host that we know. We end each episode with asking our guests to say 2 words. And because you are our super fan, but I think we'll just let you know what those 2 words. I know that you know them, but it is kick it. So Corinna, she's squinting at me. She's like, that was not a very good delivery. Asking him.
No,
I can
so
read
we
her
just want to
mind.
hear it with feeling,
Kick it. Kick it. Or do it like a Rear Admiral does. Kick it. Here he goes.
All right. Men, women, it's a beautiful day out there. White puffy clouds in the sky, dolphins swimming alongside our ship. We're on the way to our mission, and we're going to kick it.
Woo! That's awesome.
I love it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Media Casters. You can keep this conversation going and kick it with Corinna and Jules in live office hours each week. Visit themediacasters.mn.co to sign up. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe whenever you listen. Let's kick it.